Location Intelligence and GIS in a Modern BI World. This is obviously a subject that is near and dear to our hearts at CMaps Analytics. For those of you who are not familiar with CMaps Analytics, we are a cloud-based location intelligence suite designed for embedding location analytics inside of BI platforms like SAP. We're also a Google technology partner, so we use Google Maps, and we obviously connect out to various GIS solutions like ESRI or CarterDB, as well as doing many other things. But that's not really our focus today. Our focus today is, as I said, the future of location intelligence and GIS. Today's event is going to be a Q&A format, and we thought who better to talk about the future of location intelligence than bringing in one of the industry's thought leaders, Chris Evans, who is certainly made his mark and was the former head of location analytics for ESRI. He's an entrepreneur, thought leader. I've certainly been blown away having heard his talk at Gartner. Chris, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Ryan. That's a very glowing introduction. I'm tickled. Thank you.
Absolutely. And so once again to the audience, today's format, rather than having Chris come in and do a presentation for 20 minutes, 7 or 8 questions, Chris, that I'll ask you, and I know we talked a little bit about some of the types of questions I wanted to ask. And then what we'll do is we'll open it up for Q&A so people can ask follow-up questions. But to jump right in, just...
Now, Ryan, before you start, and just in the ground rules, am I allowed to ask you questions?
To be frank, you can go for it. You can fire away questions. Obviously, I wanted to have you introduce yourself. As I mentioned, I heard your presentation that you gave at Gartner. Perhaps you want to share your journey and how you've gotten to where you're at, what you were doing at ESRI, and certainly a little bit about what you're up to now.
Yeah, sure. Well, certainly it hasn't been dull. In fact, it's been a pretty incredible journey. I got started in analytics in the early 2000s, where I had the opportunity to head up a product marketing effort for what was then a market-changing, for what was then really the modern BI platform of the time. It was a market-changing release of a next-gen BI platform from Cognos. And that was before, the acquisition frenzy by the mega vendors that we're familiar with, and man, were we rocking and rolling. And from there, with a co-founder, Darren Nelson, we started a great little firm called Spot On Systems. And Spot On, we assembled a team, a great team, and we busily ran around the world making that Cognos platform do what people wanted it to do. And our tagline at the time, which I think has been somewhat of a theme through my career, was making information work. And we really focused on the intersection of where insight hits human, right? Where that point of impact takes place. And it turns out one of the top things that those humans were looking for was maps. They wanted maps in their reports and their dashboards. And so we started to focus on that. And that led us to coming into the ESRI fold in 2011, and it was great. I mean, it was a ton of fun. We were really banging the drum on location analytics. And as you know, those Gartner BI and analytics conferences, they were pretty special for me on a couple of fronts. As you know, the attendees are top-level Fortune 500 decision makers, and they're there to find ways to drive their business through information and insight. And our speaking opportunities at those events, we packed the room each time we did it, 2 years in a row. The first year, the title was Location Analytics and your analytics blind spot. And the second year was around developing a location strategy for your company. And they were really well received. And what it meant to me was that we were definitely tapping into a pent-up desire from these senior level attendees to, I'll go quote unquote, do location. but they just weren't able to get there. And that was, and I believe remains today, the big opportunity, which is bringing spatial and location to those analytics centers of excellence in organizations. We did bump into some challenges. You know, the pattern that we were initially promoting was the embed pattern. And it was a pattern that my company had success with. It's a pattern I believe your company's had success with, where we embed spatial capabilities into BI solutions. And it, you know, history is a great teacher, and I think what I believe now from that experience is that to do that correctly, you have to be an expert in the target platform. And so we've seen companies that have done this successfully, and they tend to be specialists in the platform that they're integrating into. And I think if we even back away from location and spatial capabilities, I don't know that we've seen any type of universal BI plugin that has had market success. So, I mean, that's where we started to get a little bit, we started to run into some hurdles and roadblocks, and we made a course correction and started to really promote the GIS platform for the enterprise. And while that was the right move for ESRI, it wasn't my mission. And so we, you know, 2014, we decided to part ways as friends, and that was the ESRI portion of my journey.
Oh, nice. Okay. And so one thing that I guess I wanted to do for the group here, and we've started to kind of formulate that, but we're going to say location intelligence, we're going to say location analytics, we're going to say GIS. I know that I recently wrote an article that kind of level set people's expectations on what these things, maybe from your perspective as a thought leader, you can kind of clarify or define, you know, modern location intelligence.
Sure. And I'm glad you asked that, and I'm probably going to have a bit of a controversial answer here, but I believe we actually trip ourselves up with how we use words, and you know, by defining a space as location intelligence and or location analytics, or you know, what have you. What we're actually doing is we're promoting in promoting these technologies and approaches, we're exacerbating the divide between this community and the mainstream analytics. And to me, it's somewhat of a forest and trees scenario, where at 20,000 feet, what we're all doing is just analytics, right? What we're all doing is basically applying technologies and approaches to extract information from data to answer business questions. And we use terms like location intelligence to describe the approaches with spatial technologies. But when we get to the promised land, it's all going to be part of the same toolbox, I believe, and that's where the idea of a location strategy as part of an analytics center of excellence started to gain a lot of traction, which was, you know, this isn't something different. This is what we do, and here's new tools to now do what we want to do to answer questions and to really drive our business. And so really the long view here is that the win will be when location is simply part of that analytic toolbox and is used at the right time to answer the right questions.
That's fantastic, and I use this spectrum quite a bit, at least when we're talking to customers, right? Because location analytics means so many different things depending on who you talk to, right? So, to be frank, depending on what software vendor customers use for BI, I think customers are probably influenced a little more than they should be as far as what location intelligence is, just based on the capabilities that they get. But yeah, this is kind of the spectrum that we use, you know, from analytics all the way to visualization, and then, you know, somewhere in the middle you get the analysis. So I wanted to, maybe touch on the location strategy piece, because that's something that for us at least has been critical. I mean, it's been critical to our success. It's been critical to our customer success. Those customers that we've seen create the most dynamic solutions and have extracted the most value from spatial analytics or location intelligence have gone in with a with a strategy. And ultimately, to define that strategy, they got to put their tools to the side, and ultimately find a problem worth solving. But in approaching spatial analytics, I guess why is it special, right? Why is it so much different from the traditional analytics or reporting or dashboards? Like what makes location intelligence so special?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And that's in the location intelligence community, we spend a lot of time trying to put our finger on what's special. There's a talk I used to give that basically leans on hundreds and hundreds of years. The idea for hundreds and hundreds of years we've used maps to tell stories, right? To tell stories of discoveries and whatnot. And so maps do a great job of doing just that, telling information in a very visual way, very intuitive. We all relate to being someplace, and it can be very impactful. And so those are sort of the intuitive ahas for organizations that are trying to do this and clearly make spatial special. I'm going to go on this other tangent that suggests that spatial is perhaps special because it is that underutilized tool in the toolbox, and it can lend a real strategic perspective to what organizations are trying to do, and it's developing the patterns and practices to be able to deploy the right capabilities, regardless of the underpinning technologies, and that's a theme that I believe in. But to be able to answer the where questions, right? And what are those where questions? We tend to throw out, where are my sales, where are this and that, but from a broader standpoint, you can break them down into these types of categories, and it's understanding where, measuring size, shape, and distribution, determining how places are related, finding the best location, detecting and quantifying patterns, and then making predictions. And across these categories of questions, if you will, you can go from the very simple, back to your spectrum chart, very simple visualization, and where a lot of BI communities don't do spatial in the right ways when they think of it as just another chart type. It is a very impactful visualization right through to deep and powerful analytics. And then the other capability that I get excited about that I don't believe the industry has tapped into yet is the idea that mapping makes for a great way to bring disparate data together in a very agile fashion, right, from multiple systems or from publicly available data or data that's elsewhere in the organization. To bring it together and join it through geography can create some really tremendous information products that just are game changers to the humans that are trying to drive their business. So I think that's what's in there across that rambling narrative is the aspects that make spatial special. But at the core, I think it's not being utilized in the way that it should be.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue to my next question, because you were previously at the leading provider of GIS software solutions over at ESRI. I mean, I guess I had a couple of questions along those related to your time at ESRI. I mean, one is, do you think there's some key challenges still that the BI industry has in front of it as far as embedding GIS into business intelligence? I mean, is that the right approach? I mean, is there something that we're missing, as an embedded part of the BI or analytics competency center?
Yeah, and that's I think that's a multi-million-dollar question. So what does the future hold for GIS and whatnot, and how do we approach it? Well, we talked a little bit about the pattern of embedding capabilities into the BI platforms, and where well that has worked for a few specialist firms. I don't think we've seen that pattern play out at scale. The ability to have an eye towards outcomes and the right questions to ask, in essence, puts the choice of technology onto the back burner, and the right technology for the right job, I believe, will emerge when the right questions are being asked and the right approaches to add the tools to the toolbox are evolved. And so if we look at the previous patterns of embedding as the work of, let's say, an analogy here, let's say that's plumbing, right? The ability to wire tightly these solutions together. I think the approach that's going to work moving forward is the loosely coupled information, information availability that allows the users to move from insight to insight in a very natural process. And now, if we use the analogy of plumbers, I think what we need to help organizations implement this, and it speaks to your Mapify Your KPIs program, is we need the designers and the architects of information that can develop and promote these patterns and practices to make this happen. Does that make sense, Ryan?
Yeah, no, absolutely, most definitely. Yeah, and it's interesting because the whole concept around Mapify Your KPIs is really part of our organization's journey, right? So we came in to the location intelligence space as business intelligence experts, right? Data visualization experts. And, in the process, as to your point, right, we haven't really seen embedded location intelligence in BI at scale at this point. And that's primarily because there's two reasons. One is that business stakeholders really they can't even comprehend what's possible, in leveraging spatial data to drive analysis, right? Because they haven't been doing it ever. And the second is, even if they do, it's how do we even begin that process, right? How do we, like I said in my first Mapify Your KPIs webinars, I'll travel the country and I'll share examples of awesome stories around how customers have leveraged location intelligence, and then I'm still kind of met with a glazed over look where they're saying, okay, that sounds great, but how do I apply this to my organization? Just out of curiosity, walking from your days at ESRI, was there any specific GIS or location intelligence with BI scenarios that kind of stuck with you, just as far as cool stories or interesting ways that someone went from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour and using location intelligence and extracting value?
Yeah, I've seen lots and lots of cool stories. There's a point, and I love this point, there's a point when the light bulb goes off and organizations or whomever you're with realize that we're not talking tactics, we're talking strategy. And that was always pretty exciting. We get down into a lot of different examples of where these things hit the road, but I think that your approach here is spot on in really focusing the effort at its grassroots around what are the KPIs that matter to the business. And then you can actually bring them along that evolution of visualizing interesting stuff, bringing contextual information together so that there's new insights or new information products that are presented uniquely through spatial capabilities. You're basically putting them on a journey. Now, one thing I did want to bring up from my days at ESRI, I mean, we should touch on the quadrant and my takeaway from what I'm seeing from the Gartner Magic Quadrant is that that effectively all capabilities, all of the tenets of these BI platforms have been tossed aside, and it's now first and foremost usability, self-service. Can I, as a business user, do the magic to get the answers I'm looking for and not have to rely on IT and specialists to crunch that for me? And that's been playing out for a couple of years, but this year, I think Gartner, recognizing that the goalposts had moved, effectively changed it all up, and now they've got a second quadrant that's for the the traditional IT-centric records of the centralist control solutions. Now, the one bringing that usability back to the GIS world, what's interesting is that for the last number of years, I think Tableau, my perception is that Tableau has really led with that business-centric mapping capabilities. When I was in the seat at ESRI, we got more customer requests for working with Tableau, and my own theory on this was that once people are introduced to the first level of capabilities, they then progress and want to do more, or they realize that they've actually got tremendous spatial data assets inside their organization that they want to tap into. And so, starting with KPI, starting to the pieces that matter with the business, what we're doing is we're leading organizations on a journey where they become more proficient at using those tools in the toolbox. Does that make sense, Ryan? Does that resonate with what you see?
Yeah, no, most definitely. I mean, showing the Gartner quadrant here because, I mean, from what we've seen in the last few months since Gartner pushed out their Magic Quadrant for BI and analytics, I mean, it's funny, depending on which ecosystem you work or live inside. Obviously, we do a lot of work with the S&P folks, and so a lot of experts or practitioners in that space, have pitchforks. And then, if you worked with Tableau or Click or certainly Microsoft, then they're declaring victory. But what it does show, though, what the quadrant shows, and something we've been experiencing as a vendor in BI, is also the shift in purchasing power, right? I think it's one of those things where we've talked about it for the last, 4 years that, line of business, operations, marketing, sales have more purchasing power for IT and analytics, but there's no way to reflect that, like in Gartner, right? You had 9 leaders all with IT-centric platforms, right? And so this is the first time that we've seen anything that kind of reinforces that. So, I mean, with that, so something else worth pointing out that I personally find interesting is that, Tableau, Click, and Microsoft, not one of them are reliant on a GIS platform to deliver location intelligence, and kind of the next one down being Alteryx. I mean, some of their roots are in geospatial, and actually our last webinar focused on, Alteryx and some of the, geospatial analytical capabilities that we've extracted out of there. So it's interesting to see kind of that shift also potentially influence GIS. So I guess from your perspective, do you think that the rise of these modern BI platforms, slow or will inhibit the growth of GIS and BI? Or, I mean, is there an impact there, in this shift?
Yeah, certainly the line's moving, and this is not something that's new or specific to GIS in particular, right? The glib example, like you can throw it there, is the ability to do linear regression in Excel doesn't eliminate the need and the power of advanced analytic solutions. So Does it change? Yeah, the line's moving, and the ability to do more inside of these solutions will continue to evolve. What my key takeaways from this is that whatever solutions are deployed or wish to be deployed, or as a technology vendor, what the Gartner Quadrant is saying to me now is, you better make sure it's usable. You better make sure that business users can work their way around the environment and get at the information they're looking for, because as you pointed out, that's where the business decisions are being made. Will things change? Yeah, things will continue to change. And it's exciting. It's an exciting time. I think that for me, I believe that the technologies are all there, right? Whether you're talking an Alteryx underpinning, or simple capabilities simple and advancing capabilities inside of a Tableau, or a ESRI, GIS, Carto, DB, Pitney Bowes. The technology is all there, right? We can do amazing stuff today that perhaps isn't getting done. And so what is the challenge? And I think that challenge is the leadership involving the patterns and practices to make this happen, make this real. And that's the real opportunity I see now to actually pull this all together. Yeah, that's a great visual. What is missing? What's missing is the people that can shepherd these capabilities together to make the magic happen.
That's the question in so many customers' minds, right? Is what is missing? Why is this so difficult? From my perspective, at least, I think depending on what skills and or tools you have in house, I think the ability to extract meaningful information, extract useful information out of geospatial data is frankly more difficult than others, depending on the customer and skill sets and so on. So I mean, I think you already answered this question, but I mean, do you think that the marketplace is actually missing anything right now?
I think it's missing that leadership to actually make it happen, and the where we trip ourselves up. I mean, I talked a little bit about the lexicon and the promotion of one space that actually ends up making it look and feel different than mainstream analytics. I think that the real opportunity is to start with outcomes, then move to people, desired outcomes, then to people, and then the technology is really the last decision to be made. And it's the leaders that can help organizations through this process that I think will make the technology decisions either evident or not even that important, right? That the right technology for the task at hand will simply just be there, and so that's what's missing, I think, and what I'm seeing with the approach on the Mapify KPIs. I mean, directionally, that's I think what we need to see in the space to make this all come together.
Oh, brilliant! Well, I certainly appreciate the plug. I was going to say that I'm going to take that statement that you just made and put your little picture and put a little SoundCloud on our website, because that's what we've been trying, it's what we've been trying to articulate to the marketplace for some time. So I certainly appreciate you reinforcing that from your perspective. And I think even from our perspective, we're not completely there. That's still a work in progress. And certainly we're partnering, like at CMaps Analytics at least, we're partnering and looking at other companies, to work with to kind of fill in that gap from a technology standpoint at least. So I've at least extracted everything out of you that I wanted for today's web session. Just out of curiosity, I mean, you're no longer at ESRI, right? I mean, I should go back to, actually I am. I'm going to go back to the first slide here. I was reading your article, 3 Big Lessons from a Mid-Career Break, right? And so if any of you online, kind of wanted to get Chris's perspective on what he's up to, you can read that. But for the audience, I mean, what are you working, like, what is your pet project? What is your passion right now?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm in that article. That article was a lot of fun. It was great, the reaction I got to it. But and the punchline is that be careful what you wish for in taking a break. It can actually cause a lot of stress. But I digress. I mean, the line that's still pretty much true is that I've been treating opportunities like a Vegas buffet. Um, clearly I feel that still things left to be done in the spatial realms, in making that become mainstream to analytics. But my pet project here that I'm very excited about is I'm managing to infect some people with my excitement is in around the drought situations and the water conservation issues that we're seeing acutely here in Southern California, in all of California, frankly. And it's an interesting project because it blends analytics and that idea of information at the point of human contact and spatial and whatnot. And it's called, if anybody wants to check it out, it's called EMI Domus. EMI is in friendly and Domus is in DOMUS is in friendlyhome.com. And what we're doing is we're taking a technology-led approach to really help homeowners understand where their water usage is taking place, and then to frankly be able to take immediate action in correcting that overwatering that's happening. So we're really excited about it, and it's feels like the right time, right place type thing. And I'd love for people to check it out and let me know what they think.
Yeah, we'll make sure that when we do the follow-up, I mean, obviously we set this thing up as a Q&A, so I only had slides prepped on more or less questions I was going to ask. So Chris, I'll make sure that we send out that URL for anyone who didn't capture it in the follow-up email.
Well, thank you. We're launching here in the next month, so we intend to make as much noise as possible. But I do appreciate that, Ryan.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, Chris, I wanted to thank you. I mean, I really appreciate you taking time with us and our visitors and ecosystem to kind of bring your thought leadership and expertise to the table and really share your experience with everyone.